If you've ever turned your character into a 5,000-pound owlbear just to body slam a boss from orbit like a literal Australian drop bear, used a chef's tool to aggressively grate a street thug's face like a block of Parmesan cheese, or spent 20 hours being relentlessly insulted by a sentient talking pistol named Skippy?
Name.
I'm not deaf.
Understood. Hearing within norm. Possible issue, low IQ. Reducing speech rate by 33%.
Welcome. Today, we're diving into those massive, unhinged games that you just can't seem to shake. The ones that absolutely devour your free time and keep you coming back for more. We're starting with Cyberpunk 2077. This is the one I keep coming back to, even though I've technically beaten it 4 times now. The base game alone is a solid 60 hours if you actually bother with the side jobs instead of just rushing the main story. And honestly, you should do them. Half have better writing than most full games. Night City is just a massive distraction. You'll set out for a quick quest and end up 40 minutes later climbing a billboard just to see what's up there. The combat lets you build wildly different characters, from a sneaky netrunner to an absolute maniac who punches cars with gorilla arms. And if you want peak weirdness, you have to find Skippy, a sentient smart pistol that sings Rihanna,
Bum, bum, be dum, bum, bum.
What are you doing?
relentlessly insults your combat skills, and locks onto enemy heads. Then there's Phantom Liberty, which is a better espionage thriller than most modern movies, adding a heavy story featuring Idris Elba. Update 2.3 dropped last year, adding an auto-drive chauffeur mode and a Mac port. This is the most complete, stable, and moddable the game has ever been, which feels wild given how famous of a disaster the launch was. Elden Ring and Shadow of the Erdtree. This combo will quietly eat your entire year if you let it. The base game is just enormous. It's the kind of open world where you fall off a cliff while exploring, land in a completely new underground area you weren't supposed to find yet, and somehow that's a feature instead of a bug. What I love about it over other From Software games is your horse, Torrent. Being able to gallop across the map and double jump over a giant sword completely changes the pace of exploration. Then you throw Shadow of the Erdtree on top of it, it adds an entire extra continent's worth of content, featuring some of the hardest boss fights they've ever designed. And I've died to Mesmer more times than I'm comfortable admitting out loud. This year, From Software is putting out the Tarnished Edition for the Switch 2 release, but the new stuff, like 2 new starting classes and Torrent armor customization, is coming to every platform as a cheap add-on pack landing this August. It's a perfect excuse to start a fresh character and lose another 40 hours to a horse I love more than I probably should. This is the game I recommend to anyone who wants a realistic medieval experience. Right before I watched them get absolutely annihilated by 3 bandits with sticks because they didn't manage their stamina. Henry starts out as a basic blacksmith's son who can barely swing a sword properly, and the game doesn't sugarcoat it. You will get lost because the map doesn't hold your hand. Heck, saving your game even requires an actual item in your inventory, forcing you to plan your risks. But somehow, that's the exact appeal. By the time you've put in 20 hours, sword fighting actually feels like a skill you earned. The main regions, Trotsky and Kutenberg, are dense with side content that never feels like filler, featuring taverns with drinking games, complex alchemy, and manual lockpicking. Warhorse finished off the story DLC lineup with Mysteria Ecclesiae late last year, which has Henry playing detective in a plague-ridden monastery. Between the main story and all the DLC, you're looking at well over 100 hours here, and that's before you start a second playthrough just to see how badly things go if you decide to rob everyone.
Everything all right? Hey?
Baldur's Gate 3 barely needs an introduction, but a lot of people who stop after their first playthrough think they've seen the game. They haven't. The sheer amount of content gated behind different class choices, companion approval, and random dice rolls means a second run can feel like an entirely different story. The turn-based combat brings D&D rules to life perfectly. You can set a barrel of oil on fire, drop it on a crowd of goblins from a balcony, and the mechanics just allow it. If you want the ultimate combat exploit, look up the Owlbear top rope technique. You use a druid to morph into a 5,000-pound owlbear, climb to the highest rafters, and body slam a boss from orbit like a furry Australian drop bear. Larian might have patched the scaling a bit, but it is still absolutely worth a try. Larian dropped patch 8 last year, calling it the final major update. Then, this past May, they randomly dropped a free console mod update anyway, adding a new playable race. They literally do not know how to stop supporting this masterpiece, and I am not complaining. S.T.A.L.K.E.R Heart of Chornobyl scratches an itch that nothing else really can. It gives you the raw feeling of being a small, fragile human in a place that absolutely does not care if you live or die. The zone is gorgeous and hostile, full of mutated wildlife, invisible anomalies, and rival factions who will happily shoot you just to steal your loot. The gunplay has real weight to it. Your weapons jam, degrade, and need constant maintenance. That might sound tedious, but it makes every single encounter incredibly tense. Factions even push and pull at each other's territory while you're off doing something else entirely, so coming back to an old area can mean stumbling into a completely different fight already underway. GSC earlier this year dropped the Sealed Truth update, a free chunk of story content built around a creepy underground lab. That update was also a teaser for Cost of Hope, the first real story expansion landing this summer, which sends you back to the Chornobyl plant and the new Iron Forest. If you bounced off this game at launch because of the bugs, now is a genuinely great time to go back. Final Fantasy VII will always hold a special place in my heart. This is the kind of game where I'll boot it up intending to do just one quick story mission and instantly lose 3 hours to chocobo races and card games instead. It takes the back third of the original 1997 game and stretches it into a full 60+ hour adventure without it ever feeling padded. That's mostly because every region has its own distinct identity. The combat builds on the real-time action from the first remake game, but it gives every character so many more tools that boss fights start feeling like actual puzzles. And Queen's Blood, the card game they bolted onto this thing, is its own absolute rabbit hole. You will absolutely pause the apocalypse for 12 straight hours just to play a card game against a random resort bartender out of pure spite. It actually just launched on the Switch 2 and Xbox a couple of weeks ago. Alongside that release, Square Enix added a streamlined progression option, which gives you toggles for unlimited HP, MP, and max damage. If you've been putting this off because of how systems heavy it looked, that update removes basically every excuse.
Still load in the blink of an eye.
This doesn't need flashy new content drops to earn a spot on a list like this. It's just one of those legendary strategy games that is basically impossible to put down once a session starts. You tell yourself just one more turn and suddenly it's 3 a.m. and you're 3 wars deep trying to figure out why Gandhi just surprise nuked your capital. The major expansions, Rise and Fall and Gathering Storm, add so much depth to the climate, loyalty, and diplomacy systems that you can genuinely win a match without firing a single shot, building a global empire entirely through rock bands, tourism, and massive trade networks. Or you can go the complete opposite direction and pull off the ultimate double cross. Sign a declaration of friendship with your closest ally, spend 50 turns trading luxury resources with them, and then the absolute second that treaty expires, rain nuclear fire down on their entire empire just because they built a world wonder you wanted. What keeps Civ 6 alive a decade after launch is how clean the district planning systems feel, easily eating an entire weekend. Mountain Blade 2 is the ultimate game for anyone who has ever wanted to start as a total nobody wandering the countryside and end up as the king of an entire continent through nothing but pure stubbornness and a really well-trained cavalry unit. Factions go to war without your input, kingdoms collapse, and you can insert yourself into that chaos however you see fit, as a mercenary, a bandit, or a noble climbing the ranks. The massive scale of the battles is still completely unmatched, and watching a heavy cavalry charge shatter a solid enemy shield wall never gets old. But things got even wilder with the Wartales expansion, which finally took the chaos to the high seas. It brings epic naval combat and coastal raiding into the mix, letting you command entire fleets, ram enemy warships, and lead brutal boardings. Between smithing your own weapons, managing trade caravans, marrying for political leverage, and coordinating seaborne village raids, which just rolled out in beta last month, it's the kind of game where the mechanics completely take over your life by hour 50. It's an endless, deep sandbox. This is a mercenary band management game that I didn't even know I needed, right up until I lost half my veteran crew to a wild bear because I severely underestimated how dangerous bears are in this universe. You build up a roster of fighters, manage their food and morale so nobody deserts you mid-contract, all while slowly piecing together the lore of a fallen empire through ruins and tombs scattered across a genuinely massive map. The turn-based combat actually rewards smart positioning, flanking, and utilizing the terrain rather than just stacking the biggest numbers. Your mercenaries can pick up real professions too, becoming dedicated cooks, blacksmiths, or alchemists who make camp life genuinely worth managing instead of just a menu you mindlessly click through. Shiro Games keeps adding to it steadily. Back Back in April, they released Fires in the Capital, a DLC built entirely around a single dense city full of riots, propaganda, and a massive power struggle you can nudge in different directions. There's also a bigger expansion featuring mounted units planned for later this year, so this is a game that's only getting bigger.
Carry us as we free our land.
Tainted Grail: Fall of Avalon is what happens when a smaller indie studio looks at Skyrim and says, yeah, we can basically do that, but let's add a ton of existential dread. It's an open-world RPG set in a twisted, fog-choked version of Arthurian Britain, and the atmosphere is genuinely unsettling in a way a lot of big-budget fantasy games don't even attempt. The combat mixes stealth, magic, and melee beautifully, letting you build a character that plays entirely differently from anyone else's. The choices you make ripple out in ways that aren't always obvious until much later. If you side with the wrong faction early on, you might lock yourself out of an entire quest line. There's no fast travel for most of the early game either, which forces you to actually learn the geography instead of just teleporting past it. Awakened Realms has been remarkably generous with support since it launched last year, passing 1 million copies sold. They marked the anniversary with another free content drop and even completely patched the third act, adding new areas and tougher late-game balance so you don't just snowball out of control. You know the game is in a nice place when the community of the game literally had to theory craft the best recipe for a toast. This is a zombie survival game where death is absolute. Your character dies, there are no respawns, and there's no save scumming your way out of a bad decision. I've literally had runs end after 60 hours just because I forgot to check a window before walking past it. Multiplayer servers turn that same tension into a slow-motion soap opera, where one person's terrible decision can wipe out an entire group's winter supplies. The new Build 42 update completely reworks the crafting system, adding pottery, blacksmithing, and full animal husbandry, so a well-organized base can genuinely sustain itself for years. They also finally broke the old height limit on buildings, meaning there are now deep basements to discover and massive skyscrapers to scavenge. It's been in this unstable beta state for over a year now, but the build itself adds so much long-term depth that most players I know have already committed to a fresh run anyway. No Man's Sky. The game earns its spot here purely on the strength of how much free content Hello Games has dumped into it since launch. At this point, comparing it to the version that came out back in 2016 is just unfair. You can spend hundreds of hours just hopping between procedurally generated planets, building bases, taming wild creatures, or running a massive fleet of freighters. The multiplayer adds an awesome layer to it as well, letting you team up with strangers to defend settlements from pirate raids or compare absurd ship designs in an asteroid field. They just hit their massive 10-year anniversary, and the pace of updates hasn't slowed down even a little bit. A recent update called The Swarm followed up on major releases like Remnant, which added a gravity gun that lets you fling debris around like a physics toy, alongside an entire creature battling side mode called Xeno Arena that plays like an alien Pokemon spin-off. If you tried this at launch and bounced off, the game today shares almost nothing with that original version except the name. This might honestly have the best feeling combat of anything on this list. Climbing onto a griffin mid-fight and stabbing it repeatedly in the neck while it flies into the air trying to shake you off never stops being incredibly satisfying. Your pawns, the AI companions you recruit and customize, actually learn from your specific playstyle and share that knowledge across other players' worlds. Hiring a stranger's pawn who happens to know exactly where a hidden treasure is buried feels like getting a great tip from a friend. The open world rewards exploration in a very old-school way. There are no convenient fast travel waypoints, it's just your own two legs, a rare fairy stone, and the constant threat of getting caught outside after dark when the terrifying nighttime monsters come out. Capcom just rolled out a major update adding the Eternal Fairy Stone, finally giving players reliable fast travel ahead of the Dark Arisen expansion landing this October, which adds a whole new frozen region called Norgen. They're clearly trying to fix the base game's biggest complaints, and so far the early patches are a massive improvement.
Outward deserves way more attention than it gets, mostly because it's brutal in ways that scare people off before they can get to the good part. You're not some chosen hero, you are just a regular guy who starts the game heavily in debt, and the world does not care if you wander into a fight you have zero chance of winning. Hunger, thirst, and temperature actually matter here in a way most survival games only pretend to care about. Co-op lets you and a friend split up your skills dynamically with actual couch split screen support. There's also no traditional game over screen. Dying just leads to unpredictable situations. Sometimes you wake up robbed and abandoned in a monster cave, other times a kind stranger drags you back to town. The sequel, Outward 2, was actually supposed to hit early access this July, but the studio just delayed it into 2027 after listening to player feedback, stating flat out that the current build wasn't good enough to charge people money for yet. It's hard to stay mad at a developer for choosing not to ship something half-finished.
Exhaustion. These are all part of the deal when you travel untamed lands.
Grim Dawn or Path of Exile are the dark fantasy loot grinders I always recommend to people who have completely burned out on Diablo but still want that scratch-that-itch gear chase. The setting is basically the apocalypse already happened and you are just one of the miserable survivors clawing through the ruins. The skill system is incredibly unique, letting you combine two entirely different class masteries. You can make something like a necromancer with a dual-wielding gunslinger and end up with a highly specific build that nobody else is running. On top of that, there's the devotion system, where you slot unlocked constellations onto a massive secondary skill tree for extra passive bonuses. Crate Entertainment is going all in on their massive 10th anniversary this year. They've already released a free UI overhaul, and their final expansion, Fangs of Asterkarn, is landing this July. It's adding an entirely new 10th mastery built around shapeshifting, alongside a chunk of new land that's roughly a third the size of the entire existing game map. It's a well-earned send-off after a decade of incredible support.
Crimson Desert just came out a few months ago, and it's already managed to sell something like 6 million copies, which tells you Pearl Abyss clearly knew what they were doing after keeping us waiting through years of development. You play as Cliff, a gritty mercenary trying to piece his shattered faction back together. The combat is the absolute star of the show here. It's fast, incredibly weighty, and genuinely satisfying, whether you're fighting on foot, swinging from horseback, or climbing onto massive bosses. The world is huge and built with a real sense of place, with rolling green plains giving way to harsh deserts and ruined ancient cities. Oh, and there's apparently a flying mech you unlock later in the game that I am still not over discovering for the first time. Travel itself is a core part of the gameplay loop. You're constantly cooking over campfires, managing your stamina on long rides, and the dynamic weather actually shifts how fights play out. If you want a brand new open world to completely lose 100 hours of your life in, this is about as fresh as it gets.
Pathfinder is criminally underplayed for just how much sheer content is packed into it. It's a deep, classic-style isometric RPG built entirely on tabletop Pathfinder rules, meaning the character building options are borderline overwhelming in the best way possible. We're talking dozens of classes, prestige paths, and late-game mythic abilities that let your character become anything from a literal holy angel to an undead demon lord. The narrative follows a massive crusade against an ongoing invasion of demons, but the real appeal is how much your choices dynamically reshape the entire campaign. You're recruiting unique companions, managing an actual army on a strategic map, and watching the world react to decisions you made dozens of hours prior. The combat can be toggled fully turn-based or played in a classic real-time with pause mode, depending on how you prefer to think through complex tactical encounters. It is not a short game by any stretch of the imagination. A full campaign with the expansions can comfortably run well past 100 hours, and that's before you start a second run just to try out a wildly different mythic path. The Legendary Edition bundles all 3 original games alongside almost all of their Legendary DLC, completely cleaned up and visually remastered. It remains one of the greatest examples in gaming history of choices actually mattering across an entire trilogy. Decisions you make in the very first game ripple into the second and third entries in ways that still feel incredibly impressive over a decade later. Beloved characters can live or die based on small choices you barely remember making. The combat holds up way better than I expected going back in, especially once the second game leans heavily into a more tactical, squad-based shooter feel. Plus, the Paragon and Renegade morality system gives every single conversation a weight that most modern dialogue trees don't even bother attempting. There's no flashy new update keeping this one fresh, but it simply doesn't need one. The writing and the character work are still the primary draw, and a full trilogy playthrough making careful, considered choices the whole way through is easily a 100-hour commitment if you actually bother to read the codex entries.
If you haven't revisited this world since its next-gen overhaul, you are missing out on one of the deepest and rewarding time sinks in the gaming history. What sets this game apart isn't just the physical size of its massive continent, but the sheer narrative quality packed into every square inch of it. There are no generic, hollow filler quests here. A simple monster contract you pick up from a muddy village notice board can spiral into a tragic, multi-hour storyline with choices that completely alter the fate of local towns. When you dive into the base game, master the incredibly addictive in-game card builder Gwent, and tackle its two massive expansions, Hearts of Stone and Blood and Wine, you are easily looking at a narrative-driven epic that comfortably demands 150 to 200 hours of your time. The game respects your curiosity, rewarding you for wandering off the beaten path with hidden treasure hunts, secret boss fights, and incredibly rich lore. It's a beautifully optimized, character-driven world that sets the absolute gold standard for what single-player exploration should look like.
Your heart, or just satisfying your passion.
Much like how bizarre the game itself can be, Like a Dragon famously switched the iconic series from real-time action brawling to a full turn-based JRPG combat system. It sounded like an incredibly bizarre swap at the time, but it works shockingly well once you get a few hours into the story. You play as Ichiban Kasuga, who is somehow both an absolute idiot and one of the most genuinely likable protagonists. The city of Yokohama is stuffed to the brim with so many side activities that the epic main story almost feels like the side content. There's a full corporate management simulator, high-speed go-kart racing, an entire arcade featuring fully playable retro Sega games, and dozens of unhinged sub-stories. The combat itself hilariously uses real-world job classes instead of traditional fantasy roles, meaning you can build a party around a chef who uses the essence of human grating skill to literally grate a thug's face like a block of Parmesan cheese. It's one of those special titles where the side content alone could easily fill 50 hours, and the main story is worth every minute.
So that's 20 massive games that should easily keep you occupied until GTA 6 finally drops. Honestly, if you try to finish even half of these, Elder Scrolls 6 might already be out by then. If you've made it so far, clearly you like what you're seeing. And if you like what you're seeing, maybe like and sub for more?